Hello, and what a fantastic opportunity it is for all of you to get to sit and listen to the wonderful Christine Cronau. Christine is a nutritionist in Australia who is one of the original people in the low-carb ketogenic space and has a huge number of books and amazing programs and has done amazing work in the space and has taught me so much. And it's such an honour to have you a part of the Low Carb Lifestyle Long Weekend. Thanks, Christine.
Oh, thanks for all your kind words as well, Tracy.
Oh, you're welcome. You were one of the, because your books have been out, some of your books you wrote back in 2012, I think, was that right?
2010 was the first one, yeah.
So that was 2012 when I first came into the space and started exploring and came across your books. And it's funny because I think initially I didn't realise you lived in Australia, and I get that a little bit too because you're so well known and people are like, what, she's in Australia? I'm like, yeah, she's in Australia, which is very, very exciting.
Yeah.
So your topic for the summit was the elephant in the room. Does keto work for everyone? So, yeah, does keto work for everyone? Definitely a topic I'm really keen to hear your thoughts on.
Yes, it's a topic that we need to talk about because it doesn't get talked about much in the keto and low carb space. But it's a real issue that we do need to talk about so that the people who are struggling have some answers, because I find that about 50% of women in particular will not lose weight without some guidance when they first start keto or low carb.
Yeah, so interesting, and I've definitely seen that in my work too. So yeah, why is that? What's your thoughts around that?
Well, there are a few issues, but the main things that I normally find are, well, the number one thing is insulin resistance, and the second biggest thing is starvation stress, and we get that from years of dieting. And the reason this is more important for women as opposed to men is because men don't tend to diet, whereas women have often spent the majority of their years dieting in some form, and even when they're not dieting, they probably have been low fat. And of course, when we are low fat, it's a form of dieting. So if you think about all the years we've deprived ourselves of nutrients and fat that we need, then we end up in this state of starvation stress where our thyroid can slow down. Our metabolism then, of course, slows down. And of course, the more we diet, the more that this happens, and it becomes harder and harder to lose weight.
And is it a case then of, I just find that really fascinating because I think so much in the space is around this sort of one size fits all. And, I see a lot of men, particularly recently, talking about, oh, we have to reduce our fat, and fat is this thing that, people can, consume too much of. And I suppose like anything, it can be, but makes me really uncomfortable because after personally myself spending 15, 20 years low fat, it was such a relief to learn that fat was actually okay for me. And now I'm kind of like, well, what am I getting it wrong again? Like, what's going on now?
Well, actually, this is something that really frustrates me within the low carb and keto communities, because so many people get the advice, okay, I'm not losing, what should I do? They might post on a forum or something like that, and they get advice. They almost always get advice from someone to cut their fat and cut their calories. And this is really frustrating for me because when you look at starvation stress in particular, when we have slowed our thyroid and our metabolism, this just makes this worse. The only way to really heal the thyroid and also boost that metabolism again is to eat, because the problem has been this lack of calories, the deprivation, etc. That's what's caused the issue in the first place. So we need to actually eat to repair our metabolism. Sure, we can remain on the diet train forever and continue depriving and continue not getting enough nutrients and starve ourselves. That's what we've been taught to do. But do we really want to keep doing that? Or do we want to heal our bodies, take a little bit longer to get our bodies back to optimal, and then never have to worry about weight loss or thinking about what we eat again. You know, which one do we want? And for me, it's about wellness. It's about going back to having our optimal health. You know, I you know, turned 50 last year, and I can't imagine, you know, what my life would have been like if I hadn't had done this. And yes, it took me a bit of time. It took me years to recover my health. I had so many things wrong with me. I had such a bad metabolism. My thyroid was a mess. My hormones were a mess. And to me, it's miraculous that the body does recover. And if I had given up, if I had stuck to that, you know, starvation model, if I had continued depriving, I would not be where I am today. So yes, it took me a little bit longer to get there, a few years longer than everyone else probably, but here I am, you know, 20 years down the track, living my best life. You know, I still pinch myself today because I know how unwell I was. I know how unfit I was. I know, you know, where I was headed, and I couldn't imagine a life now in my 50s where I can, you know, exercise and I've got the energy, and, you know, I don't have to think about my weight, and I can eat till I'm full and all of those other wonderful things.
Amazing, isn't it? And I'm in the same camp as you. I haven't been doing it for as long as you, but, you know, it's just incredible. And it is. That's why, you know, this whole summit's called Low Carb Lifestyle Long Weekend, because it isn't a diet. It is about, you know, letting go and freeing ourselves from a lot of that diet mentality. And, you know, everything you say and all your books and everything you've always posted just always resonates with me so much. I think because I work with women mostly too, and, you know, often the same. I've got women sitting in front of me in their 50s, and they've been dieting since they've been, you know, 13, 14 years old, which is just criminal, you know. And, you know, we have to,
it is.
Yeah. So that would be a great way to sort of, if you can share, you know, so with your clients, so you have a lady who's in her 50s, she's been, you know, the classic dieter, classic low fat, you know, insulin resistant, overweight, doesn't know what to do. So how would you sort of, all that stuff you've been talking about, how would you address that in someone like that?
The first thing I do when I'm seeing a patient who's in that predicament would be to do full blood tests, because I want to know exactly what's going on in the body. And even though I do full blood tests, the main thing that I'm looking for in this particular instance, when we're talking about not losing weight, etc., would be insulin, fasting insulin. I also check thyroid, and that's the main way I look at starvation stress to see whether that's an issue. But the problem is we can't just test those, we can't just send people off to the doctor to have those numbers tested, because the parameters that they have on blood tests these days are just the norm. So if you go to the doctor and have your insulin tested, for example, and your insulin comes back at 20, the reference range on that pathology form, it depends what lab you go to, because the reference ranges are just the norm for that particular population. So that's why the norms will vary depending on what lab you go to. But most labs will have that reference range go up to 20 or 25, 27. I've even seen it up to 46 in a lab in the US. Now that's craziness. Optimal insulin is between 3 and 5. So if we've got people going to the doctor to have their insulin tested and they're testing in the 20s and they're being told that, okay, you're within range, they're assuming that that's okay, when actually they're probably very insulin resistant. So you really have to get some knowledge about this before just, you know, it's not a matter. That's why I say with guidance. Sometimes it's just better to have that guidance. And in fact, that's the whole reason that I developed my 12-week program, because this was such an issue in the community that I really wanted to address those two big ones in particular, the insulin resistance and the starvation stress, and guide people through that process so that when they do go to the doctor and get a test, they understand, okay, they're saying I'm okay, they're saying that I'm within range, but actually my numbers are far from optimal, and this is what I need to do to bring them back.
Oh, you just stuck on me for a second, but you're back. it's going with, just to let everyone know, I'm not stopping this because Christine and I had a bit of internet issues at the start. So it is actually recording really well, but there are a few glitches. So please just excuse that. I think, you know, you'll be able to hear Christine well enough and get a message across. But if it glitches, just, I apologise. You know, it's part of being in Australia.
Hopefully it doesn't freeze with me in a really awkward position.
Well, it probably will, knowing the internet. But anyway, I wanted to ask you about the starvation stress. So how would we know if we have starvation stress? And can you explain that all a little bit more?
So starvation stress for me is what happens when we diet long term, and it's pretty much what happens to most women, because that's, you know, we've come from that dieting background. Even, you know, the way I grew up, we were extremely poor. My parents struggled to put food on the table, yet we threw away our egg yolks. I mean, that's the madness, you know, that most of us have come from. You know, you've got malnourished children throwing away the most nutrient-dense part of the egg. And I actually remember my sister and I stayed with a friend of ours, a family friend of ours who was Greek back in the day, and she made us boiled eggs for breakfast, and we did our normal thing and we ate the egg white and left the yolk on the plate. She absolutely lost it. She could not understand why we would do that. And of course, when you look back at it, it makes absolutely no sense. And of course, that's why some of the Mediterranean cultures have done a lot better with certain things, because they haven't come from that really strict dieting mentality that we have been taught in Western countries. But it just shows, you know, the cultural differences there. Because if you were to talk, you know, to most people about that, they wouldn't blink an eye, you know, that you're eating egg white omelette or leaving your yolk on the plate. But yes, it certainly is crazy, and that sort of thing really magnifies just how crazy it has all been. But yes, because most of us have come from this dieting mentality, low-fat mentality, our thyroid cannot work optimally without the nutrients that we get from the proper fats, etc. But also, starvation stress happens when, you know, the body thinks it's in famine. The body thinks it's not getting enough. So it does slow the metabolism down. And of course, the thyroid regulates the metabolism. So, you know, if the body thinks it's in famine, it's going to, you know, try and slow things down as much as possible, because it doesn't know how much, you know, how many nutrients it's going to get. And of course, that's why most people tend to put weight on after they've dieted. So they go on a diet, they lose weight, then they go back to normal eating, and of course, what happens? They gain the weight back plus interest in most cases. And of course, if you think about that happening over and over and over again, this state of starvation stress gets worse and worse and worse and worse. So by the time they come to me, you know, by the time they start keto, they're probably in a pretty severe state of starvation stress. So the first thing I look for is to test the thyroid. But again, we can't use the parameters, the norm parameters that you're going to get back from your doctor, because the majority of women these days have some form of underactive thyroid, and that's just a fact. And it's because of all this crazy dieting that most of us have done. And fortunately for men, they don't tend to fall into that trap as much. You know, men tend to, you know, sneak the bacon and eggs whenever they can, even if they've got someone watching over their shoulder. So, you know, women are the ones who tend to listen and try and do the right thing. And unfortunately, that has burned us in this, you know, in this area.
And an interesting thing too, I loved your perspective on in terms of starvation stress, because it's not just generally we cut out fat. It's also, you know, animal protein that a lot of us, you know, will cut out. And I know yourself, you were vegetarian for a long time until, you know, you got really, really sick. Are you able to share, you know, maybe your story around that, and then the importance of including animal protein in our diets for health?
Absolutely. And that's another thing that I always test when I'm doing full bloods for a patient, because even people who are doing keto, I often find that they're protein deficient because, you know, women tend to undereat protein. And that's another frustrating thing I also find on some of the keto forums or some of the low carb forums is, you know, all these warnings about protein, overeating protein. And yes, it is true that if we overeat protein, that it can be converted into glucose, and we know that. However, I don't talk about that as much because I find that women tend to undereat protein regardless. And so it can be quite dangerous message to get out there, because then people, you know, you find people restricting, and women love to restrict. I mean, it's just been pumped into us for so long that women think, oh, I can't have too much of this, I can't have too much of that. So we don't want to get this idea that we need to restrict protein. Protein is essential, and we really want to have good protein levels to function well, to detox well, to, you know, recover, to have good muscle mass, you know, so many different things. It's really essential. Going back to your other question about me being vegetarian, yes, I was vegetarian for 5 years, and I was severely protein deficient at the end of that. And I was one of the conscientious vegetarians. I was trying to do all the right things. I was combining grains and legumes and, you know, doing everything that I thought I should do, whole grains, vegetables, you know, what I thought was the healthiest diet in the world. But unfortunately, that is how I ended up so unwell, because I just wasn't getting the nutrients that I needed. We need to have animal protein, and we don't have to be meat eaters to do that, as long as we are happy to eat plenty of eggs. Eggs are a fantastic vegetarian animal protein, but we do need animal protein to thrive. You know, the majority of us do need that.
Absolutely. So how would you actually know if you're protein deficient? You said that you test for protein deficiency. Is that a specific test that you know?
Yes.
How would you know that?
It will be part of the liver markers. If you ever have ELFTs done, it will be part of those liver markers. They test your total protein, albumin, globulin, etc. And I like a total protein of at least 70. 70 to 74 is my ideal for protein. I often see women, you know, anywhere between 61 and 68. Now, 61 is very, very low protein. So it's really important for women especially to think about protein and think about having, that's why I like 3 solid meals per day with a good serve of animal protein in each meal. And this is another problem with fasting as well. Fasting is fantastic for various reasons, but we have to be conscious about getting enough nutrients as well. So, you know, when people are fasting, I do recommend firstly not fasting at all until you're completely fat adapted, because otherwise you're just exacerbating your starvation stress if you already have that. But then you really want to be conscious about making sure you're getting enough protein on those days that you are fasting. So we don't want to just be not eating enough food. And, you know, a lot of people love fasting because it reduces calories at the end of the day. And while fasting does have great benefits, we need to think about how much we're doing it and making sure that most of the time we are getting adequate nutrients, especially your fat and your protein.
That was definitely my next question to ask you about fasting, because again, you know, there's so much out there on it, but you know, when we come from this perspective that we've been talking about today, it's just another layer of stress on the body. And I love how you talk about, you know, making sure you get fat adapted first. Actually, that's a good point. There may be people listening that don't understand what being fat adapted is. Are you able to explain what being fat adapted is?
Sure. So when we first start out, most of us are sugar burners because well, going back even further, most of us are born, well, we're all born fat adapted because that's, you know, how our bodies are designed to work. The problem is if we continually dump sugar and carbohydrates into our bodies try and burn that off, and then they go back to burning fat. But the problem comes when we're continually dumping it in, and the body just ends up what I call a permanent sugar burner. So instead of burning fat, which is its natural state, it becomes a sugar burner. So when we're a sugar burner, we then have to become fat adapted again. And the way we do that is, for me, to go strict keto, and it takes about 4 or so weeks to become fat adapted. And even at that stage, it's very easy to be knocked out of ketosis again if you sort of go stray away from, you know, that very strict ketogenic diet. So it's important to continue doing that for enough time that you become what I call a permanent fat burner. So I'd be one of those. So for the last 20 or so years, I've been in a ketogenic fat burning state. That doesn't mean that I'm always strict ketogenic, on a strict ketogenic diet, because once you're a permanent fat burner, you can have a little bit more carb and you will stay in that fat burning state. Whereas if you're just in the beginning stages, if you have something that's off your strict plan, you will jump out of that state very quickly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you're sort of saying you have to burn that fat burning fuel, but once you've kind of got it, you can become metabolically flexible in that your body can kind of, you know, shift easily if it needs to burn carbs, a little bit of extra whole food carbs, but then shift back into that state of fat burning.
Actually, what it is you're continuing to burn fat. So, for example, as a permanent fat burner, if I were to eat a bag of potato chips right now, I would still continue to burn fat. My ketones would drop a little bit, but they wouldn't disappear. Mm-hmm. And then the next day they'd be strong again. But if a person who was just starting out, say they'd only been in ketogenic state for 3 or 4 weeks, if they ate a bag of potato chips, boom, they're out of ketosis, and they pretty much have to start again, and it's going to probably take them another week to get back in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And I do think there's so much misunderstanding out there and misinformation out there about that.
Yes. And so what I recommend is being fully fat adapted, you know, a good solid state of fat adaptation before you start fasting, because you want to make sure when you're fasting that you're burning fat, that you're not going back into starvation stress.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have your 12-week program, which you've mentioned, and I've heard amazing things about it. So maybe in the context of a woman, you know, I'm assuming it's for men as well, but you know,
absolutely, yes.
Yeah, obviously the most of the audience watching will be women for this one. But if they were to start, you know, and start this 12-week program, are you able to talk through, because I think it might really give us a good idea of the journey and the processes that are really important for people to go through, you know, when they do want to make some changes and look at lifestyle and talk, you know, all the stuff we've been talking about.
Yeah. Well, the main thing, and this is really the reason I developed it, was the main thing is to guide people through the process so they don't get lost, you know, and think, oh, well, this just doesn't work for me, or it doesn't work for everyone. I've heard that so many times. Keto just doesn't work for everyone. Whereas I find that's not the case. I find that it works for almost everyone, But sometimes, like I said before, around 50% of women in particular, it won't work for straight away without the extra guidance. So this is the whole reason I put this together, was to provide that guidance so people don't get lost and think, you know, I'm one of those people it doesn't work for, and then they, you know, go back to some other form of dieting and they stay sort of in that dieting mindset, and they don't have the opportunity to, you know, have the benefits of this. Because I remember when I first started, number one, I gained weight.
Yeah, I've heard that.
and so I started thinking, maybe there's some truth to this. You know, maybe fat does make us fat after all. But I had done so much research that I was pretty positive about it, and so I just stuck with it. But imagine what I would have missed out on. This is why I'm so passionate about it. What I would have missed out on if I had been one of those many people who give up and says, keto doesn't work for me, because it felt uncomfortable in the beginning, and because I didn't want to be doing anything to gain weight, etc. So basically, it guides you through the process. The very first thing I get people to do is to have their bloods tested. So the main thing I look for, I like to look at cholesterol. It's good to have a baseline to see exactly where your cholesterol is beforehand. And I have them test fasting insulin and glucose and thyroid. And the other thing that I recommend testing these days is also vitamin D and iron, because I find that even though we're in this amazing, most of us are in this amazing country with lots of sunshine, the majority of people here are vitamin D deficient.
Yeah.
And so iron and vitamin D, I find that so many women are exhausted, absolutely exhausted. And so those are some of the things that can contribute to exhaustion: vitamin D, iron, and thyroid. So it's sort of, you know, those are some optimal extras. But I do recommend everyone get blood tests to start, because if you know what the situation is, then it really helps. Like if you have your test come back and your insulin's 45, then you go, oh, no wonder, you know. And so I'm on the right track here. I know what I need to be doing. And of course, the program is also designed specifically to bring that insulin down, because the majority of people will have high insulin. And it's also designed to boost thyroid function, give the thyroid what it needs to start working optimally again. And it just guides you through the process. It also will tell you what's likely to come each week, which really can help. For example, what week you're likely to experience intense cravings. Now, a lot of people have these intense cravings and they think, oh, I just can't do this, you know, like it's just too hard. And then when they read my email and watch my video about it, and they realize, oh, this is actually a great sign. When I'm getting those intense cravings, it's because my body is searching for that last bit of glucose right before it switches over to burning fat. And so, of course, if you are armed with this information, it makes things so much easier, because you're more likely to stay on track, because you understand exactly what's happening. You know what's likely to happen. And, you know, it also guides you through that process of, you know, if you're not losing weight at this stage, what does it mean? And does it mean it's not working? Or do you need to do these things, et cetera, et cetera?
It sounds amazing. So I'm very interested in the gaining weight thing, because it's certainly something that I've seen as well. And what's going on there? So why would our body gain weight when we switch to ketogenic?
So if we go back to what I was talking about before with the starvation stress. So if you think about it, most of us start keto or low carb when we're literally coming off a huge low-fat diet. Even if we weren't specifically dieting right before that, then, you know, we were probably low-fat, et cetera, et cetera. So that means what happens when we come off a diet, when we go back to normal eating, whether it's low carb or keto or anything else, what happens? We tend to gain weight. if we're in that state of starvation stress. It's as simple as that. So some people, when they start, they're like, I'm not losing. And I always say, you're not gaining. That's fantastic. So because, you know, there's a percentage of people who will just not lose. There's a percentage of people who will gain a little bit. So it's just walking people through that process. We've got to allow our bodies to recover. If you think about it, our bodies have been deprived all this time and they're just going nom, 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 you know, give it to me. Give me all these nutrients that I've been desperate for. It's like if you have been really sick or you've been suppressing your cholesterol production with a statin, for example. What happens when you stop doing that? Your liver will go into overdrive and say, oh, I need to make all this cholesterol I haven't been able to make. So your body will compensate for these things, you know, like it sees it's coming out of a famine. I've got to grab all this stuff, you know, while I can. So it's just a matter of, you know, knowing what's coming so that you can think, right, my body's healing. I need to allow my body to heal. I need to eat. And in fact, I've got some amazing stories in the program just to give people that reminder, because there's, you know, just some amazing stories about, you know, people who, you know, they gained weight for a good while, and then I have this one lady who said, it just felt like my body was finally fed. Yeah. And then it stopped and the weight just went away on its own after that. So we've got to sort of come away from this deprivation mindset and allow ourselves the space to heal. The other thing to remember is think about how long we've been doing this. You know, how long have we all been dieting? How long have we been really putting our bodies through the mill? And so we've got to allow ourselves a little bit of time to heal. And, you know, I know we all want the quick fix and we want, you know, very fast weight loss. We want to see immediate results. But at the end of the day, what I want more is long-term health. I want, you know, to have energy in my 60s and 70s. You know, I want to still be able to do chin-ups and, you know, and live a fantastic life and run around after grandchildren and, you know, all of that sort of stuff. That's my long-term vision. I want to feel good. I want to feel vital. And so many people, just think about how you feel, you know, when you get up in the morning. Is it a struggle to get up? Are you jumping out of bed with vitality? Are you excited about your life? Or is it a drudgery because you're so exhausted and so tired? So what do we want for ourselves? Do we want to lose weight and continue being deprived and tired and hungry and irritable and grumpy? Or do we want to live with vitality and health and, you know, well and be well? And I certainly know what I want. And so hopefully I'm able to guide a lot of other people, you know, to a path of wellness.
Yeah. Well, I know what I want too, and I want what you're having, and you look fantastic for 51 this year. I mean, amazing. Yes. And it is possible. And I think sometimes we've never seen it, or it's been so long since we've seen it. We just don't think it's possible. And it all gets wrapped up in, oh, it's a normal part of aging. This is just how it is. But it's not how it is. It doesn't have to be that way, does it?
It doesn't. No, it doesn't have to be that way. And you see so many people, you know, like farmers who, I remember this amazing story when I first started doing this back in 2010. Someone sent me this story about this farmer who, he called him an old grizzly geezer who stood up at one of the meetings that they were having to try and figure out what they were going to do about this whole low-fat business that was coming out, you know. So all these farmers were getting together to try and figure it out. And he sort of stood up and said, I've been, you know, putting more meat and eggs, etc., fat into my guts, you know, you know, for years and years. And, you know, basically he was saying that, you know, this low-fat thing was ridiculous. And this guy who was telling the story said, yeah, he died at 98 rolling his tractor down the slope. You know, like that's how you want to go. You want to kind of live with vitality to the end. You don't want to end up, you know, what Weston Price called physical degradation, which is what's happening. You know, you go out there and you just see everyone so unwell and no energy and so lethargic, and it's really, you know, hard to see sometimes. But that's not how we were designed to live. And of course, we wouldn't have survived, you know, back in the day when we had to fend for ourselves and find our own food. We wouldn't have survived like that. So, you know, it's not natural. It's more natural to live with health and vitality.
And medicine, of course, has come such a long way. And I mean, it is about the quality, because with pills and potions and lotions, I mean, people can be kept alive for a very long period of time, but it is that decline over decades in your quality of life that, you know, yeah, I can take a pill, but it's still, you know, where's the quality of life? I mean, and, you know, every week, you know, we hear stories of family or friends of family. And, you know, we had one of my husband's friends the other day had his legs, he's in his early 50s, and he had his legs amputated because of diabetes, you know, like it's just, yeah, it's so important. I think you just got to start to question everything. It doesn't have to be that way. It's not normal. I mean, I'm sure there will be people that would come to this lifestyle and there will be some things that may not heal. I mean, we can't maybe undo some things, but there are plenty of things that the body's an amazing healing machine, isn't it?
Absolutely incredible. And yes, you're right. There are some things, you know, that are more tricky, but even those things, like I had a damaged lung from about 9 years ago, and I've really been working on it, and I never thought it would improve, but it's slowly improving, you know. And I think, and I still can't get over it, you know, how much better it's going, and just working on that. So everyone's got their cross to bear, you know. Everyone's got something probably that they need to work extra on. But the thing is just, you know, the body is an incredible thing. It does heal, and we've just got to give it that right environment sometimes and be patient with it, because, you know, it does do amazing things.
That thing called patience, which so many of us have to relearn. But yeah, I agree. It's not gonna, we're not gonna undo what's been taken years to develop. You know, it's not gonna undo overnight, but trusting the journey, trusting the process, and, you know, trusting our bodies, you know, like how many of us just don't trust our bodies? But
absolutely.
Yeah, they are amazing. Can I ask
you, when you say that, I just want to mention, so many women in particular hate their bodies, and I think it's really important to stop doing that. Our bodies are amazing, and yes, we've been led astray. You know, we've had people tell us the wrong things, and we've ended up in situations, you know, as a result of that, you know, poor health, overweight, etc. But our bodies themselves are amazing things, and we need to learn to love ourselves again, love our bodies, and let them do what they do. You know, just give them the space to do that without putting all this pressure on ourselves to, you know, lose 5 kilos or lose 10 kilos within this time frame, etc., etc. It's about giving yourself that space. You know, it's like putting your mask on the airplane before you help your child. You've got to look after yourself. You've got to give yourself that space and, you know, really give yourself a break after all the years of everything that you've been through. Give yourself a break and put yourself first, and, you know, let yourself have that time to heal.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. It's so true. And, you know, even, you know, when we look at our bodies, if we look at them in the mirror and they're not the way we want them to be, you know, often, you know, I love sort of just talking about the fact that you know, even so we get overweight, but that's because our body's actually trying to keep us healthy, believe it or not. It's doing everything.
That's right. And, you know, if you think about the function behind that, most of the time it's because our blood sugar is just way too high. Our insulin's come in, which is our fat storage hormone. Now, it will take the glucose into our muscles and store some of it, etc. But you can only store a small amount at any one time. So any more than that, and it has to do something with it. What's it going to do with it? And it has to put it in the fat cells in most cases. So it is trying to protect us. Our bodies it's always trying to do the best that it can for us. So, you know, we can help it along by giving it what it needs instead of giving it all this extra work to do. But it is always trying to help us do the right thing.
Yeah, it is. Oh, it's been so lovely to talk to you, Christine. And, you know, the internet has actually, it's done a really good job. It's done the best for us, which is great. So I really appreciate that. I thought it might be nice just to finish off with, you know, obviously, you know, you've already shared a lot and there's been a lot in here for women to think about. But what would you like to sort of say as a final message for people listening? Just from you, yeah.
Well, I think the biggest thing is just get that guidance, you know, because, you know, it can just be such a gift to live the rest of your life in health and never having to worry about your weight. I mean, I can't even imagine a time, you know, back when I used to start a new diet every Monday, and I would eat all weekend, of course, because I was going to start on the Monday, and of course it failed by the Tuesday, which meant you end up eating more than you end up dieting. You know, it's just freeing ourselves from that horrible diet train that, you know, we've all been on, you know, most of our lives. And the other thing is just think about the fact that, you know, when people talk about reducing fat so that you can burn your body fat and things like that, it's really important to remember that it's not just about burning body fat. Yes, we want to burn our body fat, and we will. But it's also about nutrients that we're taking in. Fat is one of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. We need those nutrients to heal all of the things that I've been talking about. So it's not just a matter of burning body fat. And a lot of people talk about it like that. You know, if you reduce the amount of fat you eat, then you're forced to burn your own body fat. Well, yes, that will give you energy, but it doesn't give you any nutrients. So if you can look at it a little bit more holistically, and, you know, give your body what it needs and make yourself number one, make yourself the priority, invest in yourself. It's just amazing what you can end up getting out of it. And that's why I'm so passionate about it, because really, you know, my life was heading down. My health was terrible. I had no energy. I had chronic fatigue. I was one of those people who barely got out of bed every morning. I was depressed. I just was an absolute mess. And to think, you know, that I've been able to turn all of that around with a change in diet. And it actually probably took me longer because I didn't have that guidance, you know, and I really had to work hard to find the resources that I needed to make it work. And, you know, hopefully I can prevent that, you know, with other people, and they can have a much easier journey because I've got it all there, everything that I've learned over my 20-odd years in this field. So, you know, it's the best chance, hopefully, of streamlining that journey and making it as easy as possible, and just having that understanding and, you know, talking to other people in the group, etc., and, you know, knowing that you're all on the same journey and that support for each other, and knowing that there's someone who's going to tell you, yep, it's okay, you know, this is completely normal, and this is what's likely to happen. So number one message is look after yourselves. Give yourself a time.
Absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. I was going to ask you, are you able to provide a link, particularly for anyone watching that wants to enroll in your 12-week program?
Yes, absolutely. I can do that. Yeah.
Beautiful. So that will be down below. So if you are interested in joining Christine, which I highly recommend that you do, all the information you need is below. And the other question I have about that is, because this summit's global, are you open to anyone outside of Australia joining as well?
Oh, yes. Yes, actually the program's designed to work anywhere. So, you know, I have people in Canada, in the US, in the UK, all over the world who are doing the program just fine. And I have that in mind when, you know, I had that in mind when I designed it. So it will work anywhere.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Christine. I know we got through all those hiccups with the internet, and yes. it's been amazing. And honestly, if anyone just watches one of the summit talks, it would be this one, because so much of what you talk about, I, you know, just resonate with so deeply. And I think if we can see the possibilities of health within us, and do those small, take step by step, get some guidance, you know, on doing it, you know, anything's possible. So thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.